Hello Booktube, I'm Spooky,
And I'm Boo.
and today we're doing the Booktube Newbie Tag.
Welcome to Spooky and Boo's book reviews.
We just started our channel, and as your friendly neighborhood ghost peppers, we just wanted to introduce ourselves to the Booktube community.
So let's dive into a few questions.
Question 1. Why did we start this channel?
Well, Spooky and I have always liked to haunt around and talk about books we've read, and we both love animation, so why not combine the two?
We also love puppies, but getting a dog to talk into a microphone is a lot harder than it looks.
Question 2. What are some fun and unique things you can bring to YouTube?
Well, Boo and I both love to read, and while our taste in books is similar in broad strokes, it's actually pretty different once you get down into specifics, so we're hoping that will lead to some pretty entertaining conversations in our reviews.
That's true. For example, I have good taste in books.
Hey!
Question 3. Why do you love reading?
One thing that I really like about books is that more than any other storytelling medium, you really have the opportunity to get inside the character's head. In a lot of books, you actually see the character's train of thought, so it creates a very personal experience between the reader and the characters. You really get to know them on a very deep level.
I agree. Also, it's the one place where you're the director, you're the cinematographer, you're the costume designer. You can really bring everything to life with no limit to budget or technology or anything, so I think it's very unique in that way.
That's true. I think what's really cool about books is that two people could read the same exact book and see it in their mind's eye, and it's the same sequence of events, but they're seeing it and imagining it completely differently. It's totally unique to you, which is really cool. Question 4. What book or series got you into reading?
Well, I've loved reading as far back as I can remember, but I think around 5th or 6th grade I actually started reading books that were at a better level. Books that even now as an adult I would want to reread and would enjoy. From what I can remember, the first of these were probably obviously Lord of the Rings, but also the Darkest Rising series by Susan Cooper. So I think that got me into fantasy, and it's never looked back.
I think The Lord of the Rings did that for a lot of people. I think that was the starting point for a lot of people.
Yes, set the bar high too.
Yeah, it does. I think the first books that I read that weren't a school assignment were actually some of the Star Wars Expanded Universe books. And those were easy to get into because you already knew all the characters. But I think the book series that really drew me in, particularly into reading fantasy, was The Deathgate Cycle by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. That was a really fantastic series, and I think that's what really got me into reading fantasy books.
Question 5. What challenges do you think starting a booktube channel will be the hardest to overcome?
I think probably the biggest challenge will just be finding the time to read consistently and just staying on a regular upload schedule to make sure we get our reviews up at a pretty regular pace. I know for me in particular, I listen to most of my books through Audible, and it's good because I know exactly how long it's going to take to get through the book, but there's no way to speed up. I can only go as fast as the narration, so longer books in particular, it takes time to get through them.
Also, it takes a few hours to summon our ghost spirits from the ghost pepper underworld.
Question 6. What type of books do you like to read?
Well, I mainly read to relax on the train home after a long day of haunting. So I tend to go to my comfort zone, which is sci-fi, fantasy, mystery, crime. But within each field, I do try to find books that are a little different from just the stereotypical book you would find in that genre. I do think I want to go back to historical fiction a bit more, which I used to read a lot more of, and definitely explore some new types of books.
I think I'm kind of the same way. If left to my own devices, I would probably just read sci-fi and fantasy pretty much until the end of time, But I know it's also valuable to step outside of your comfort zone because that lets you see new perspectives and experience different types of stories. So I do try to read books occasionally that are outside of those genres. Some books that would be recent examples were Room by Emma Donoghue, that was a really good book, and All Quiet on the Western Front by Eric Remark.
Question 7. What will or do you enjoy the most about making booktube videos?
I always find it interesting to hear what other people thought about a book. Reading a book is, I think, a very personal experience, and two people could read the same book and have totally different impressions and reactions to it. So to me, it's always cool to hear what other people thought of a book, and the booktube community, I think, is a really good place to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I just really enjoyed talking to Spooky about books. And I think this was a fun chance to bring our ghostly forms to life for you guys.
Question 8. What types of themes would you like to see either more or less of in books?
For me, I wish we could see a little less of the typical young protagonist who gets too much control over the narrative and somehow ends up having to save the whole universe. I think that you see this a lot, and sometimes background adult characters gets just left behind and don't get used as much because they don't fit into the typical young hero mold. I mean, I don't read much YA. I didn't even read much YA when I was more Y. But I think novels aimed at a younger audience would benefit from having more diverse leads from different age ranges and perspectives. I think the whole point of books is to kind of go to new places and have new experiences, so it seems kind of a waste to go from one teenage life to maybe an amazing teenage life in space or in fantasy setting, but it's still another teenage life. So I think I would like to see less of the typical young hero in books.
So you mean like having YA books, but the protagonist isn't necessarily a young adult themselves, or not the only protagonist?
Yeah, and I mean, YA has this more than other books, but just in general. I think that there should be a mix of different ages and levels of experience within stories, and I think that would make, honestly, all types of books more interesting.
I can see where you're coming from. I think something that I would like to see more of in books are well-developed villain and antagonist characters. I think a good example for me is Cersei from A Song of Ice and Fire. Cersei is not a nice person by any stretch of the imagination, but she's very believable, and when you see her perspective and you see kind of how she's arrived at the person that she is, she's very believable, and you can understand how she became the person that she is and why she thinks the way she thinks. And I think villains like that make the story that they're in a lot more human and a lot more relatable. So I think that's something that I would love to see more of. And I think there are already a good amount of books that have well-written antagonists, but I think that's something that I would love to see more of in general.
Question 9. What are some of your booktube goals?
I think my two major goals for this channel are to have a consistent upload schedule would be one, and also in terms of booktube in general are to find books that I normally wouldn't read. I think getting different perspectives and kind of seeing stories that I normally wouldn't come across in my own research and the ways that I find books is a great aspect of booktube. So I'm looking forward to trying to find stories that I normally wouldn't find myself.
Yeah, for me it's kind of establishing a channel and kind of doing reviews, but also trying to think of other types of videos that are interesting and kind of become a creative outlet for us in different ways that might keep evolving.
Question 10. What is a fun fact about you or a hobby besides reading and writing that people on booktube might not know you have?
Well, as a hobby, we made our own hot sauces last year.
And a fun fact about us is that as ghost peppers, we're 200 times hotter than a jalapeno. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe to keep your YouTube haunted.